So, you want to start building Gunpla, but maybe you don't know where to start. But that's okay, I don't blame you. After all, where does one even begin with such a massive hobby? With so much misinformation and so many misconceptions surrounding the hobby, it's very easy for beginners to be turned away and intimidated at first glance. But that's why I'm here, to clear up any misconceptions or questions you might have about this hobby. If you're looking to learn about Gunpla, stick around, because I'm about to turn your intimidation into excitement. My name is YouSeeGundam, and welcome to the ultimate beginner's guide to Gunpla. Now, before we get started, there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on. I'll try not to say too much, but these are important, so bear with me. First off, this is not a video on how to customize your Gunpla. In this video, we will only be covering the bare basics of what Gunpla is, how to get into the hobby, and how to snap together your very first Gunpla kit. So if you're looking for a tutorial on how to panel line, or how to paint your kits, or do custom scribing, or anything like that, you're not going to find it here, and I'm sorry. This is a guide for the absolute beginner. Now, secondly, this video will be heavily categorized. Information will be separated into digestible chunks, and if you scroll down, there will be a pinned comment with a table of contents including timestamps to each category. This way, if you need something specific answered, you don't have to watch the whole video, you can just skip right to the section you need. That being said, if you enjoy the video and you find it informative, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Anyways, that's all I've got to say before we get started, so let's get right into it. Now, there's a few misconceptions I've heard floating around from time to time from people discussing Gunpla who don't really know anything about the hobby. And no, I don't mean people spreading misinformation to try to lead people astray. I just mean more like misconceptions that newcomers may have that might deter them from wanting to get into Gunpla. The first one I always hear about is, do you need to paint Gunpla? I can't tell you how many times I've suggested that somebody get into Gunpla and I get, but I don't want to build Gunpla because I don't want to have to paint my model kits. Well, then you're in luck because you don't have to paint them. In fact, painting your Gunpla kits is usually considered customizing or going the extra mile. The plastic parts for Gunpla kits are already pre-colored for you. Aside from maybe some fine details and some possible color correcting stickers, what you'll usually get straight out of the box is more or less a color accurate model kit. Now, of course, if you do want to go that extra mile, you definitely can paint your model kits, and a lot of people do, but it's not required. Misconception number 2 would be, isn't Gunpla hard to build? And to that I would say, no, it's actually very straightforward and simple. Even for a first time or brand new beginner, as long as you can follow labels and picture instructions, you will be fine. Generally, there's absolutely no glue required for assembly, and I only say generally because I think there's some random old kits that may require some glue here and there, but for the most part, everything just snaps together. Assembly is almost always easy, and once you know what you're looking at, the instructions are easy to follow as well. So don't be worried or intimidated about having to assemble some super difficult, complex thing, when in reality, it's more akin to building a Lego set. You just have to cut the parts out yourself. Now, the last misconception I would like to clear up is, doesn't it cost a lot of money? Well, yes, but also technically no. It's all up to you on how much you want to spend, and actually a lot of the kits that you'd probably want to start off as a beginner can be found for around $10 to $20. However, if you're like me and you absolutely get sucked into the hobby, you may find yourself spending a lot more money than you originally envisioned. Trust me, my wallet's been a lot lighter ever since I found out about this hobby. So that's about it for the misconceptions, or at least the ones that I commonly hear. The main thing I'd like everyone to take away from this is basically, if you're nervous or intimidated about starting to build Gunpla, don't be. I promise you, it's not as bad as you think, and almost everyone can do it. Now, if you are a true beginner, one question on your mind might be, what is Gunpla? Well, to me, it's the thing that keeps me broke and could probably be classified as an actual addiction at this point. But seriously, Gunpla is the official name given by Bandai to their line of plastic model kits based around the series Mobile Suit Gundam. And if you don't know what Mobile Suit Gundam is, it's a TV show with its first series that premiered in 1979. And it's about space, and death, and wow, cool robot. Anyways, nobody really cares about that. Back to Gunpla. So the word Gunpla itself is a portmanteau of Gundam and Plamo, Plamo being shorthand for plastic model. So essentially, Gunpla means Gundam plastic model. So to summarize, if it's a model kit of something from Mobile Suit Gundam, it's Gunpla. It doesn't even necessarily have to be made by Bandai. Sure, that is their official term for their line of kits, but there is Gunpla made by third-party sellers such as brands like Supernova. People might argue the semantics of whether a third-party kit can be considered Gunpla, but you don't need to concern yourself with that. All you need to know is that Gunpla means Gundam plastic model. So it looks like you've got your first Gunpla kit in front of you, huh? Well, I bet you're pretty excited to tear into it and go to town, huh? But where are your tools? You are gonna use the right tools, right? Hey, what are you doing? No, stop, what are you doing? You can't just pull the parts off the runners with your grubby little hands. Start over. Alright, so seriously now, you do need some tools before you can get started working on Gunpla. If we're being extremely basic, you only need one. All you really need to assemble your first Gunpla kit is a pair of hobby cutters. These are commonly referred to as side cutters or nippers. This is the tool you'll be using to cut parts off of runners, and if you don't know what runners are, don't worry, I will be explaining it later. Now people might be wondering, what brand should I go with, which side cutter should I pick out? Well, if you're just starting out, it doesn't really matter as long as they look something like this. Of course, cheaper cutters will not do as good of a job as expensive ones, but if you're just starting and you're just looking to get the job done, don't sweat it. I still to this day personally use a pair of generic cutters and they work just fine. Of course, if you do want something high end and you're looking for the best cutters you can get, you could look into something like Godhand because those are usually regarded as some of the best ones you can get. However, like I said, if you're a total beginner, don't sweat it, just make sure you have a pair of one of these on hand. Now, one other tool that I would recommend that you have on hand is either an X-Acto knife or some form of sandpaper or files. Basically, what these will be used for is to clean up the surface of the part after you cut it off of the runner. This process is called nub removal, but I will explain that in a later segment. All you need to have handy as a basic beginner is a pair of side cutters and either an X-Acto knife or some sandpaper. I also personally like to have a cutting mat under anything I'm working on. So now that you know what tools you need, it's time to pick out a kit to work on. But you might be asking, where do you buy Gunpla from? Don't worry, I'll tell you everything you need to know right now. So you're in the market to buy Gunpla, but the question is, where do you get it from? Maybe you've looked around and haven't really found anything, maybe you've even looked at a few local hobby shops with no luck. But don't worry, you still have plenty of options available to you. The vast majority of your Gunpla shopping will probably have to be done online. Of course, there are some physical retailers that do stock Gunpla. If you're in the West like me, specifically America, you have to remember that Gunpla is a niche within an already pretty niche hobby. Over in Japan, they have Gunpla in 7-Elevens, but over here the pickings are often pretty slim as far as physical sales go. However, certain places like Barnes & Noble and even some GameStops do stock Gunpla, albeit in small amounts. I'm personally fortunate enough to live next to a couple of hobby stores that stock a ton of it, but I know that's not the case for everyone. So if you are like most people and have no physical retailers or very limited supply near you, here are some places you can go to find excellent Gunpla selections online. Some of the largest trusted names in Gunpla shopping are HobbyLink Japan, USA Gundam Store, Gundam Planet, Mandarake, and you can even get Gunpla on Amazon. Those are the main places that many people tend to buy their kits from. However, there are still a few smaller businesses here and there that carry Gunpla too. And thanks to developments from Bandai as of late, if you're a Westerner like me from America, you can now get stuff from the Premium Bandai website. But hold on, what is Premium Bandai? Well, it's basically Premium Bandai, often shortened to P Bandai, is the name given to a selection of kits only available on the Premium Bandai website. Up until recently, these kits were only available inside of Japan, but as I said earlier, Bandai is making a move to bring P Bandai to the West. P Bandai kits often have a very limited production run and are therefore much more rare than standard Bandai kits. P Bandai is oftentimes recolored, but sometimes they are brand new kits entirely. Although these kits can be really hard to get your hands on, don't be discouraged because they don't make up the majority of Bandai's product selection. So now we know all about how to buy Gunpla, but now we need to figure out what to buy. When you're thinking about buying a kit, one of the most important things to know about and consider is what grade the kit is. But what exactly is a grade? What do grades mean? Well, in my case growing up, they meant no video games for the rest of the week. But what about when they're applied to Gunpla kits? So what are grades? Well, good question. In fact, this is something that I wish I knew a lot more about when I first got into Gunpla. I didn't know anything about what any of the terminology meant. I just went online and looked at a bunch of stuff and I was like, huh, that looks cool. I don't know what any of that means, but it's probably not important. And that's the story of how I ended up with the high-grade Banshee Norn Unicorn Destroy mode as my very first Gunpla kit. The moral of the story here is don't be like me, make informed purchases and decisions. So grades, what are they? How do they work? Well, Gunpla grades, to put it simply, is a labeling system that refers to differences in scale, quality, and usually price. Knowing the grade of a kit will give you a general idea of what to expect out of the box. The grade will always be clearly labeled on the box and usually in the item description online. Once you know what you're looking at, it's really easy. You'll have no problem finding the labels and distinguishing between them in no time. The typical grades you'll see on Gunpla are high grade, real grade, master grade, and perfect grade. However, there are plenty of other grades that are not as common, but they are still worth talking about. Now don't get me wrong, it might seem like there's a whole lot at first, and it may seem even a bit overwhelming, but trust me, it's really not that bad. I'll be going over the aspects and differences between each individual grade in the next segment, which is right now. Now, just as a precursor to this section, I'd like to say a couple of things. First of all, try to keep in mind that a kit's grade is not necessarily indicative of its overall quality. Now, I hate to say that there are bad kits, because really there are no bad kits. Every kit has issues that can be fixed if you're willing to put the time into them. But out of the box, there definitely are kits that have more or less flaws than others. Just try to remember that maybe just because the kit has a master grade logo on it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a great time with it. I strongly encourage you to research online any kit that you're thinking about buying, especially as a newcomer. Another thing to remember is that scale is not the same as size. Gunpla grades basically have their own scales assigned to each one. For example, high grades are relegated to 1/144th scale, but they are definitely not the same size. In fact, some of the largest kits ever made have been 1/144th scale high grades. So to summarize, grades are not the end-all be-all indicator of overall quality, and scale is not indicative of size. With these two things in mind, let's move on to what makes these grades all different and unique from each other. And yes, I'm going to be reusing the Evangelion music. Piss off. Leave me alone. So what makes a high grade a high grade? Well, if you see an HG logo on the box, it's a high grade. Seriously though, Bandai's high-grade line of Gunpla are model kits that are relegated to 1/144th scale. These kits are generally the cheapest and are usually the quickest and fastest to build. High grades are what I would personally recommend that you start off on as a beginner. I'll elaborate more on why I think that way later in the video, but for now let's just stick to talking about the grades. These kits do tend to be lacking in the color separation department, so to mitigate that, usually you'll see a lot of color correcting stickers on these kits. And although putting stickers on kits is not bad, if you don't feel like dealing with them, you can always paint them if you so choose. Prices for your average high grade kit will usually range around the $10 to $40 mark, not factoring in shipping and handling if you're buying online. Now, one last thing, something that does trip up some new people when it comes to high grades is you'll sometimes see different looking high grade logos. Some will say HGUC, some will say HGAC, HGOO, stuff like that. The Gundam universe contains multiple timelines, and anything after the HG label, such as numbers or letters, is just indicating what series or universe that this kit comes from. It can be pretty helpful if you're trying to sort through and look for kits just from a specific series or timeline, but it's nothing to get tripped up over. Master grades. Master grades are a lot of people's favorite line because for most people, they hit that sweet spot of size, articulation, detail, and a great price point usually for what you get. Now, don't get me wrong, the Master Grade line is far from perfect, however, there are some real gems to be found in there. Master Grades are relegated to a 1/100th scale. They tend to be a lot more color accurate than high grades. They have better detail and usually better articulation. You may see some color correcting stickers here and there on much older kits. Master Grade kits usually come with some form of decals and markings as well. If you're not familiar with these, don't worry, we'll be covering them later. Master Grade prices are really all over the place, but if you had to narrow it down, they are usually between $30 and $100. Now, for the people looking to move up a grade, if you're usually building high grades and you may be intimidated by the Master Grade line, I can tell you right now, don't worry. Master Grades really are not that much more complicated to build than your average high grade. They just contain more parts for their inner frames and to have better color separation. One last thing to mention about the Master Grade line is there are a few subcategories that fit into this. One of the main subcategories is Master Grade 2.0. If you see anyone or hear anyone talking about this, just know that basically it means a kit was out before and it basically got a remaster. 2.0 Master Grades are just more up-to-date versions of their older counterparts. Now, the other important Master Grade subcategory is Ver-Ka kits. If you're at all involved in the Gunpla community, chances are you'll see a lot of people talking about Ver-Ka kits. What these are is essentially a line of Master Grade Gunpla designed by mecha designer Hajime Katoki. That's where the title comes from because VerKa is short for version Katoki. VerKa kits are just redesigns by Katoki based on what he thinks they would look like should they exist in real life or be more grounded in reality. VerKa kits tend to have a ton of detail and are pretty notorious for how many Waterslide decals they come with as well. Again, we'll talk about decals later. But be warned, they can be pretty prone to idiosyncratic issues, so just be careful. Also, something else noteworthy about VerKa kits is they only usually come out with a new one once per year. So basically, if you see VerKa in the name of a kit or on the box, it's just a Katoki redesign. So what exactly makes a real grade what it is? Well, to put it simply, real grades are like the love child of high grades and master grades, and what I mean by that is, real grades are all 1/144th scale just like a high grade, however they have an inner frame and detail comparable to master grades. Older real grade kits also came with a mostly pre-assembled inner frame called the MS joint inner frame. However, Bandai has been moving away from the MS joint because it was known to loosen up over time and cause a lot of stability issues with older real grades. So if you're looking for a really good real grade building experience, I would definitely recommend to you that you go look for newer kits. Now that's not to say that the older kits are terrible, but just like with any other line of Gunpla, the farther back you go, the more issues you may tend to run into with the kit, just due to the age of the kit and the dated engineering from that time. Something else to keep in mind is that real grades feature a ton of small, tiny little parts, but due to all these parts, they have really good color separation. They also usually come with decals and metallic stickers. The price range for real grades usually ranges around $30 to $40, so a bit more expensive than your average high grade, but kind of in the ballpark of your lower priced master grade. Perfect grades. These are generally considered to be the best of the best when it comes to Gunpla. They usually feature the most surface detail, articulation, and gimmicks. Some of them even come with their own LED lighting kits, which are super cool. Perfect grades come in at a 1/60th scale, and they are usually some of the most expensive kits that you can find, ranging from about $160 to $250. The selection of perfect grade kits is pretty limited, but what we do have currently is pretty damn good. However, despite literally having the title perfect in their name, perfect grades are not always, well, perfect. I'd just say, like any other Gunpla kit, before you buy, do a little bit of research, because they can be prone to being a bit quirky. So now the grades we just went over are, to me, what I would consider the main grades when you're first starting out, or what you're going to see most commonly. However, these are definitely not the only grades out there. There are quite a few other ones that you'll notice when you start shopping around, so we'll go over each of those real quickly in case you run into those and are curious on what they mean. And just because I didn't lump these in with the first few grades doesn't make the ones we're about to talk about bad by any means, they just aren't necessarily as popular or common. The first grade, or FG, line of Gunpla contains kits that are super cheap and extremely simple. The first incarnation of this Gunpla line came out in 1999 and features 3 kits that are molded in only one single color. However, in 2007 there was a second incarnation of the first grade line featuring 4 new kits, all from Gundam 00, and this time they were molded in different colors. First grades really aren't commonly sold in many places, but if you can get your hands on one, you should be able to find them for about $10 or less. Advanced grade, or AG, is a grade of Gunpla that started in 2011, and it's basically exactly the same thing as first grade, except AG features only kits from the Mobile Suit Gundam Age series. Just like the first grade kits, these are 1/144th scale, incredibly cheap, incredibly simple kits, and unlike the 1999 run of first grade kits, these are molded in multiple colors. The advanced grade line ran from 2011 to 2012 and features a total of 24 kits. These kits, just like first grade, have very limited detail and very limited articulation. Each advanced grade kit also comes with a microchip to be used in the Gundam Gauging arcade game. However, if you're like me, I don't really think you're going to find much use for that. These kits can also be found for around under $10 or less. Have you ever wanted a high grade the size of a master grade? Well, then the 1/100th line is for you. These kits are, as the name suggests, in 1/100th scale. They are, to put it bluntly, basically upsized high grades. This grade is also commonly referred to as no grade or non-grade, however this is not really an official term. Despite the fact that it's not official, it is still pretty commonly and widely used. There are some kits in this line that are also in 1/60th scale, however that is pretty rare and I doubt you'll ever really come across those. If you want to get your hands on a 1/100th kit, the price is generally in the ballpark of $20 to $50. The Reborn 100 line goes hand in hand with the 1/100th line in the sense that it is the rebirth of the 1/100th line. Bandai has more or less turned the line into somewhat of a home for more niche kits that may not have sold as well as full-blown master grade releases. The quality is getting noticeably better as time goes on, and they're definitely better quality than most of the 1/100th kits that you'll see out there, but Reborn 100 is still going through some growing pains. The kits are all still in 1/100th scale, and the quality lies between a high grade and a master grade. You can usually pick one of these kits up for about $30 to $60. Mega-sized kits are gigantic. Coming in at 1/48th scale, these things will tower over even your perfect grades. Hands down, these will be some of the largest kits in your collection. They generally have the same build complexity and roughly the same quality and articulation as their high-grade counterparts, but what they lack in those departments they make up for with some really sharp sculpted details and a ton of surface detail. There's no doubt that the main feature of these kits are their sheer size. Unfortunately, the mega-sized line as a whole only has 6 different kits, but if you want to get your hands on them, they should only cost about $80 to $100. However, depending on where you buy from, they are a little bit more rare nowadays, so they may be a little bit more expensive than that. SD, or Super Deformed, is a line of Gunpla featuring chibi-style reimaginings of various mobile suits from different Gundam series. They aren't exact recreations of the mobile suits themselves, so they can't really be put in an exact scale. However, on average, they do stand about 5 inches tall. They generally are pretty quick and easy to assemble, but they do tend to heavily rely on a lot of color correcting stickers. Stickers aren't the worst thing in the world, but when there's a ton of them, that is a good thing to keep in mind. You can generally find SD Gunpla for around $10. So now that we know all about every single Gunpla grade, how do we know which one to start with as a true beginner? Well, my recommendation to you, plain and simple, is start with a high grade kit. And there are a few reasons for that. For example, high grades provide you with the smallest possible barrier to entry into Gunpla. They're very easy to get your hands on, very simple and quick to build, and are usually the cheapest kits out there. So if you end up building a high grade for your first kit, you'll have a simple, fun, and quick first experience. However, if you don't end up liking it, then it's okay, because you haven't spent a lot of time or money on it. And if you don't like it, it's totally okay, because remember, it's not for everyone. All that matters is if you're interested, that you give it a fair try. Also, I know that first impressions are very important. However, you shouldn't let your first impression of Gunpla dictate how you feel towards the hobby as a whole. If you happen to end up with a kit that has a lot of flaws as your first kit, don't be discouraged, because there are definitely a ton of good ones out there, and not all of them are like that. Just remember, give it a fair try, and don't let one bad experience ruin an otherwise really great hobby for you. Before you get into building Gunpla, there's a few things that you really ought to keep in mind. The first thing to keep in mind is that it requires a lot of patience. Building Gunpla can sometimes be a long and even tedious process, especially as you start to get into larger and more intricate kits. Just remember to be patient and take your time, and it will pay off in the end. Now, assembling Gunpla is not necessarily hard, however, you can have some moments of confusion if you lose focus. Make sure you're always paying very close attention to the instructions, because there can be subtle details that are very important. Again, this ties into just taking your time and making sure that you do everything right. This will save you the hassle of having to deal with parts you placed in wrong, or potentially even breaking some more fragile parts, and while it's not that common, it can still happen. However, again, just take your time, don't rush, and focus, and you won't have these problems. Another big thing to note is if you start feeling bored, there's no shame in just putting down the kit and coming back to it later. Building Gunpla should be fun and relaxing, and it should be something that you want to do. It should not feel like a chore. Trust me, you're not going to have any fun putting kits together if you're feeling burnt out while doing it. Just take your time, do it at your own pace. And again, like I said earlier, if you run into moments of frustration, worst case scenario, have a bad time with the kit overall, don't let it shape your opinion on the hobby as a whole. Just make sure to focus, take your time, take breaks as you need to, try your best not to get discouraged, and of course, most importantly, try to have fun. Alright, I think I've talked enough, so let's get straight to the point on how to build your very first Gunpla kit. Get out your tools, get out your kit. I don't necessarily recommend this particular kit for your first one, this is just the one that I had laying around. And now we open up the box. And yeah, I forgot I already started working on this guy and never finished him, but it'll work for demonstration purposes, I promise. Now, upon opening the box, you're going to be greeted by a bunch of stuff. I'm going to really quickly explain all the terminology of everything that you need to know based on the stuff that's in the box and stuff you're going to hear throughout the building process. This way I can just talk about it freely and you'll understand understand what I'm talking about or be able to come back to this and use as a point of reference if you don't understand anything. So first off, we have the manual, pretty straightforward. We have these sheets of plastic which contain all the parts. These are called runners. These tiny pieces of plastic connecting the runner to the parts are known as gates, and these little pieces of plastic that are left over after cutting a part off the runner are known as nubs, nub marks, or stress marks. You'll also commonly either get stickers, decals, or a mix of both with your kit. As far as stickers go, we have foil stickers, and decals usually come in 3 types: sticker style, dry transfer, and water slide. I'll explain the differences between these and how to apply each type of marking in a little bit, don't worry. But for now, we've got our box opened and we've got everything out in front of us in a pile. And this is where it comes time to make sure that we organize our workspace. Having an organized workspace leads to a more streamlined building process and a less stressful experience overall. I personally like to start by setting the manuals and any markings or decals off to the side. Each runner has its own letter assigned to it and can be organized in alphabetical order. I personally have my own runner organizer, which helps save space and keep these organized. I really recommend that you either buy these or make one for yourself because it does save a lot of time and space. Now that we have our workspace organized, let's open up the manual and take a look. The first thing you'll probably notice is you're going to see a lot of Japanese in here, but don't worry, you don't have to be able to read a word of it to understand what's going on. All of the actual assembly instructions are conveyed to you in clear picture instruction format. Now I won't be walking you through the entire process of building this kit because, well, let's face it, we'd be here all day. But I will show you what you need to look for in the manual in order to be able to cut out the right parts and put them together. So let's jump right back into where I left off on this kit, and I'll show you my process of locating a part, cutting it out, cleaning it up, and attaching it to another part. So right here in the manual, we can see 2 clearly labeled pieces. The letter and number labels next to the parts will always indicate the runner first and the part number second. So this part is E117, so we have to go find runner E1 and locate part number 17. And there it is. So now we just need to take our hobby cutters, put them right on that gate there, and you're going to want to make sure that you leave a little bit of plastic attached to the part when you make the cut. Try not to make your first cut flush with the surface of the part because you're just going to stress the plastic and leave a visible mark. After cutting it out at the gate, we're left with a nub on the part. This is where your X-Acto knife or sandpaper that I mentioned earlier will come into play. I personally like to use the X-Acto knife for now, and what I do is I just make sure I'm using a sharp blade and make small cuts to slowly remove the nub. Now you have to be careful for 2 reasons here. One, because you can hurt yourself. X-Acto knives are very sharp, especially when brand new. Always cut away from yourself and always make sure that your fingers are out of the way. I cut myself pretty badly on my thumb when trying to work on the real grade tall geese, and I don't want that to happen to anybody else. The second thing you have to be careful of is when cutting the nub away, you can potentially leave a crevice or a little bit of a valley instead of a flush surface. So just try to be gentle and don't cut too deep. The second way, and probably a more reliable way of cleaning up nubs and getting a smooth finish, is using sandpaper. Make sure to use multiple grits of sandpaper. I'd recommend starting at 600, going to 800, and then finishing off around 2000 or higher. Make sure to take your time and do not apply too much pressure. You can also wet sand to make your sandpaper last longer and have a smoother finish overall. Now make sure to repeat everything that we just did for all the rest of the parts that are shown in the step, and follow the assembly process as shown. And remember, you won't need any glue, it's all snap fit. Now as you're building, you may notice a few strange symbols, and I'll explain to you what each of those means. Now just keep in mind, you don't have to memorize these, and if you forget what some of these mean when you see them come up, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to prevent you from building anything. They're just kind of there to help you along. Over time, you'll be able to recognize what these mean upon first glance, but in case you run into these in your manual of the first kit that you build, don't be tripped up by them. So the explanations for each symbol are as follows. This one means to apply a foil sticker here. If it's not labeled with a number, it'll usually be labeled with a Japanese character. If it does have a Japanese character, you don't have to be able to read what it says. All you have to do is just match it with the same character on the sticker sheet. This symbol means the exact same thing except for decals instead of stickers. This symbol means to place parts on opposite sides and is usually shown next to 2 part numbers. This one means that a similar part will be placed on the other side and is usually shown only next to 1 part number. This symbol means to pay attention to which way your part is facing. This symbol means to be careful when tightening screws, but you don't really have to worry about this because modern kits don't use screws, or at least most of them don't. This symbol means that the part has some excess plastic that needs to be cut off. Make sure to look at very carefully what it tells you to cut off, because I've made the mistake of accidentally cutting off a connection point instead of the excess plastic. This symbol means to repeat the step however many times it says in the symbol. This one means that you're going to be connecting this part first, and this one means that you're going to be connecting this part last. This one means to rotate the part the amount of degrees shown in the symbol. This symbol indicates optional parts. And finally, this symbol indicates a part on the opposite side that will move in the same direction. So now that you know how to read the manual, find parts, cut them out, clean them up, and read all of the symbols, really the last thing I have to touch on for you guys today is decals and stickers. Of course, beyond this, there is an entire world of customizing your Gunpla, trust me. There's all sorts of crazy stuff like painting, weathering, panel lining, conversion kits, etc. However, I won't be going into any of that today because first of all, the video is already long enough as it is, and this guide is for the absolute beginner as I said before. We're only going over the basics of putting together your first snap-built kit, which is the foundation for getting into everything else. Now there's nothing wrong with being just a person who snap-builds their kits, but I do encourage you to start getting more creative and start customizing your Gunpla once you're comfortable with putting them together. So stickers, decals, how do they work? Are they complicated? No, they're not. They're actually really easy. Like I said earlier, we have a few types, so I'll be going over those briefly right now. Foil stickers are the most basic kind, and they're exactly that. Stickers. To apply them, I like to personally peel them off the sheet with the tip of my X-Acto knife, gently set them into place, and push them down with either my fingers or something like a cotton swab. Now for the different types of decals. I won't be going too in depth, but I will explain the differences and how to generally apply each one. Sticker style decals are exactly that. They're stickers. Take them off the sheet and stick them on wherever they go, and that's about all there is to it to those. Dry transfer decals are a little bit more complicated. You'll know they're dry transfer because they'll come on a clear sheet against wax paper. Cut out the decal you want to apply, tape it down onto the model wherever you want it to be applied with the side that was facing the wax paper face down onto the model. Then apply some force with something like your fingernail or ideally some kind of blunt object and rub back and forth. This will transfer the decal onto the model kit. Keep rubbing until the decal is fully transferred. Now for water slides, these will come on a blue sheet of paper. You'll see these a lot with Verka kits and some other master grades and perfect grades. Now to apply these, get yourself a small bowl of water. Warm water works best, but don't worry if the water becomes room temperature or a little cold, it won't really affect it negatively. Cut out the decal you want to use, let it soak in the water for a little bit, pull it out, put it on the model kit, and use a cotton swab to slide the decal off the backing paper. You can then slide it around back and forth a little bit to get it into position. If it dries too quickly and you don't get it positioned exactly how you like, you can add a little bit more water to slide it around some more. Once you get it in the position you like, take a dry cotton swab and roll it back and forth over the top to squeeze out any water trapped underneath the decal. Now we know how to put on all types of decals, but how do we know where to put them? Well, if your kit comes with markings or decals, there will almost always be diagrams in the back of your manual showing the model kit and where each individual decal or sticker goes. So there's no guesswork involved, you don't have to worry about freehanding it, just follow the manual and you'll be fine. With that being said, that's basically all the information you're going to need to be able to successfully put together your first Gunpla kit. All in all, to have the best possible experience when building your first Gunpla, just remember to take your time, read the manual, stay organized, use the proper tools to cut your parts out and clean up the nubs, and most importantly, have fun. So that's gonna just about do it for the ultimate beginner's guide to getting into Gunpla. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video and you found it informative, I would really appreciate it if you would consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. And if you do subscribe, make sure to hit that bell so you get notified of every time that I upload. If you felt like I left anything out of this video, or if you have a question that was unanswered by this video, leave a comment below and I'll do my best to reply and answer it for you. Also, if you'd like to stay up to date with what I'm doing on my YouTube channel or what I'm up to when I'm not making videos, feel free to go follow me over on Twitter at YouSeeGundam. We also have an official YouSeeGundam Discord. If you'd like to join that, the link will be down in the description. Anyways, that's going to be all from me for today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, this has been YouSeeGundam signing out.